Okay, so we want to continue working with the French Alps website, and we want to start applying certain things, most importantly floats. So we currently have this navigation, and it's a vertical navigation. We want to make it a horizontal navigation. And if you remember from the lecture that if we apply float left or right to a navigation, it becomes horizontal. So let's go ahead and do that. First, let's look at the HTML. We have the navigation inside of a nav element, which contains the unordered list, which in turn contains the LIs. So 4 LIs for 4 navigation items. And we gave each of the LIs the same class orange because we want them to look alike. And in style.css, we have li.orange, and all we did is to remove that bullet point which appears by default. So what we want to do now is change the vertical flow to a horizontal one. To do that, I'm going to apply a float left. It can be right as well, but I'm using left this time. So let me save this and refresh the page. Hold down the command key and hit the letter R. And that's my horizontal navigation. Obviously, I have many things to look at, to consider. First, I don't want them touching one another. I wonder what this odd left margin is. My layout is messed up with these images and so forth. But if I'm considering this step by step, I'm doing the right thing because I have a horizontal navigation now. Let's put a background color right behind each of those LIs. So if I go ahead and say background color yellow, this is temporary, okay? I'm not going to use yellow for the navigation, but just for us to see how the layout is working. So save and then refresh. Okay, this is my LIs, and they have a background color of yellow. Now let's remove these images because actually on the home page we will be having a nice horizontal cycle of wide images. So this was just for us to learn how to call an image and how to place an image on an HTML page, but we won't be using these two images on the home page. So I'm going to go ahead and go to index.html, select these two images and hit delete, save and refresh. Okay, this is what we have. Now let's do something else. You see this div called div ID content? I want to go ahead and give it a background color. First, let me see what its order is in HTML. So I have the nav, the UL, the LI, and then I have the div ID content. So after the LI before the section, because div ID content contains the sections, this is where I will write div bound content, open close curly braces, and all I want to do is just give it a background color like green, which obviously again is temporary, just because I want to see what's happening. So save this and refresh the page. Okay, so this is very important. On purpose, I put this green background color just for us to see what's happening here. So whatever you see in green, that's div ID content. Let's look at the HTML. Div ID content, which opens here and closes here, it includes two sections. All of that has been colored green, and it's all this rectangle. Now, if the div is a block element, and LIs are a block element, the UL is a block element, and the nav is a block element. Block elements are supposed to flow vertically, so they go under each other. How come this green div ID content, how come it is behind these LIs? Why is it behind the yellow? Why is it not starting right under the LIs? That's because the float was applied. So if you remember the concept of being plucked out, let's repeat it. We gave each of the LIs a float left, and applying float on the LIs plucked them out of the flow. So the LIs are no longer in the order of elements in HTML. They belong in the float world, if you want to think of it that way. So if they got plucked out, their parent, the UL, collapsed. So it's a collapsed, thin, horizontal, transparent nothingness, this UL. Same thing the nav. The parent nav also collapsed because it contains the UL, which contains nothing. So the nav also is a horizontal imaginary line of height 0. And so div content slides behind the LIs, taking their place and becoming number 1. Okay? So this is exactly what we talked about in the slides, and we are applying it on the website, and we see the problems happening because of the floats, and then we fix them with, if you remember, the clear. Okay? So if we go ahead and tell div pound content, this green div, we tell it to clear the float or go under the float, go under the obstacle. The obstacle is the height of the LI, right? So since we gave the LIs a float left, we can go ahead and give the div pound content a clear left, which means please div pound content avoid the obstacle that the LI orange is causing. So go under it. Let me save this and refresh, and that's it, it's solved. So we cleared the float of the LIs by giving a clear left to the div pound content. Okay, now let's continue working. What we want to do is, now I mean, we understood what's happening. Now it's all about styling and having fun. Let's align these words within the LI. Let's give a nice width to the LI and so forth. So starting with the width, if this is a 1,000 pixel wide container, right? This whole thing is 1,000 pixels wide, and we want the navigation to start from the left side to the right side, and we have 4 buttons. What should the size of each button be? What should the width of each button be? 250 pixels, right? So let's go ahead and do that. li.orange, I'm going to go ahead and give it a width of 250. Did I say 200? It should be 250 pixels. So 1,000 divided by 4, 250 pixels. Let's save this and refresh. Okay, wonderful. Each LI is 250 pixels wide, as you can see. There's no more room for the 4th one, so it jumped to the new line. The reason is, let's think about it. What is the reason? What is this odd left margin here? So remember that some of these block elements, like the body element, like the P element, they have default margins. This default margin, this left margin, is being caused by the UL. Okay, so the UL obviously contains the LIs. The UL is inside of nav, right here. And since it contains the LIs, I'm going to place it before the LI so that the order is right. So I'll go ahead and say UL, open, close, curly braces, and then margin, 0, padding, 0. Later on, it will become a habit that every time you are working with ULs, automatically you set the margins to 0. Whenever you're working with the body, you automatically set the margin to 0 so that you avoid that extra space. And then if you wish to add it, then you specify the value that you want. Okay? So save this and then refresh the page, and that problem is solved. We no longer have the margin, we no longer have that padding. and everything is fine. Now let's go ahead and center these words within each LI. And to do that, I'm going to give the li.orange the text align center property. If you remember, text align center is a property applied on block elements that contain inline level content. Li is block and the words are inline, and so applying this property will center the words within that block element. Oops. Refresh. Okay, so this is the words. Each word is centered within the Li. And now we want to work with the hover color. So when we hover over the Li, we want it to change color. When we hover over each navigation item, we want it to change color. Not only the words, but also the box itself.